very good evening to everybody and welcome to the latest in our series for the blockchain APPG. I'm Chris Holmes, Lord Holmes of Richmond, delighted to be chairing tonight's session. And a very interesting session it is because it goes beyond blockchain, it looks at convergent integration, AI, blockchain, Internet of Things, just for starters. And like all good events, we have a little bit of audience participation right from the get-go. Got a bit of a survey on the go. Birgitte, do you just want to talk us through that, please, at the outset?
I'll just put my survey or the survey of the APPG blockchain into the chat. And in the survey, we are asking two questions. It's very quick. The first question is on which sectors we believe is going to be affected the most by a singularity or convergence between AI, blockchain, Internet of Things. And the other one is really why it may not be happening as fast as we think it would, or it should. Some would then say it is happening. So you can clearly click that in your survey, but there's also sorts of several reasons on why it may not be happening. So please, the audience, if you can fill in the survey, and then we will be looking at it later in the session.
Thank you very much indeed, Birgitte, and do all participate because we always told how it's all about data, and indeed it is. And look at us there. We're even creating some while we go through tonight's session, and we'll come back to that in a bit. We've got four excellent speakers. They're going to talk for about 7 or 8 minutes each. Then we'll hear from our parliamentarians and panel, any questions, and then throw it wide open to everybody to participate and bring up any questions from the presentations that we'll have had. So do be thinking about questions as we go through. We wanted to make this as participative as possible. Our first speaker, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Alexandra Brintrup. She has many good things about her CV, but from my point of view, fabulous that she is at the same university that I went to, so they must be doing something right. Dr. Brintrup, please, from the University of Cambridge.
Thank you very much, Lord Holmes, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I just have one slide, and I'll speak a few minutes about the convergence effect on supply chains. So hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra. I lead a research group at Cambridge's engineering department, which focuses on how AI can be developed and applied to make supply chains more efficient, more transparent and sustainable. So what we do is we analyze patterns in data to predict disruptions, delays, quality issues, prices, who actually is involved in parts of the supply chain that companies do not have visibility over. What do those companies produce? What ingredients, components they might be using, and what they might be producing. So with such knowledge, what we can do is we can then take optimizing actions to nudge the supply chain to a state that is more in line with our goals. And that may involve reconfiguring the chain, creating risk mitigating actions, such as increasing inventories, rewiring the supply chain, and even finding best prices or strategy for negotiation. Our primary focus is on designing algorithmic approaches that can tackle typical challenges that we see in supply chain data, which are generally characterized by uncertainties, data imbalance, and the need for highly scalable, explainable, and optimal solutions. So as a digital manufacturing group, we also make heavy use of IoT technology and increasingly blockchain for facilitating autonomous interactions that can take place between self-interested parties. And that's really what a supply chain is. They are consisted of what we call selfish agents, so individual companies aiming to maximize their own goals with limited information over their environment. So that in itself often results in systemic inefficiencies. And our goal by using the convergence effect, I guess, is to alleviate some of those problems through autonomous information sharing and decision-making systems. And some of the most exciting research projects that we are currently working on combine AI-based methods with some other digital technologies that have been mentioned in this panel, such as IoT and blockchain, which are exemplary really of the convergence effect that we are discussing here today. So IoT and blockchain technology, they help make supply chain intelligence real time and autonomous by closing this loop between sensing and then analyzing data and then helping give collective decisions and actuating them in real time. So let me give you a couple of examples of increasing complexity here to put all of that into context. So these are the scenarios that I'll be talking about here. The first one, this one on the left-hand side, was a scenario that we developed in collaboration with a local startup called Fetch.AI, which is a blockchain company based in Cambridge. So this enables information sharing in real time on supply chains that do not necessarily have a costly interoperable platform. So here in our scenario, what we have is a perishable goods delivery chain that is formed on an ad hoc basis. So companies involved could include wholesalers, third-party logistics providers, and retailers. The retailer here would like to be assured of the quality of the perishable product by accessing information on the conditions such as temperature and humidity that the product has been kept in before it arrived at the retailer's store. And the retailer may choose to apply pricing algorithms based on this information, for example. So normally setting this up would require a often costly, push-based information transfer system to be in place, which each party in an ad hoc chain would not want to pay for because the relationship is not long-term enough, so transaction fees wouldn't be justified. What we can do here is to couple individual companies and vehicles and warehouses with IoT sensors and couple the IoT sensors itself with an AI system called software agents. So agents here would be representing each organization, and they can find and interact with other software agents through a kind of social media search engine, let's say. And then they can establish that they are indeed a part of a transaction using the blockchain, and then they can then access the sensor data using a unique product or an order identifier. This then would eliminate the need to develop permanent push-based information systems and allow SMEs to access this type of technology. Now, a slightly more complex example here on the right-hand side has been built on a similar coupling mechanism to eliminate inefficiencies in logistics. So I'm not sure whether most people are aware, but in the UK, the 63% of heavy goods vehicles that we see on the roads only share heavy useful load, and the average vehicle utilization remains under 60%. So that obviously leads to congestion and unnecessary carbon footprint on our roads. And sharing vehicles for deliveries would be an obvious answer to at least partially eliminate some of those inefficiencies, but this does not get implemented due to an incentives problem. So suppliers wouldn't know where they are sending stuff, and so that they are sending stuff to similar locations. Buyers would not want to spend manual effort in orchestrating vehicle sharing. And a centralized orchestration provider, such as a mediator, could be helpful, but suppliers wouldn't want to pay unless they see a benefit. So here, how can this coupling help? Is that software agents, they alleviate manual orchestration by automating the search for information and also optimizing the route that needs to be taken for vehicle sharing. So here what we have implemented was an IoT-based mechanism that senses where vehicles are and how much space is in them that is available. Then we coupled this with an AI algorithm called reinforcement learning, which is then embedded into software agents that can then help dynamically optimize route allocation. And what's more, we can then incentivize individual organizations to work with one another by sharing the value that is gained from increased vehicle utility. So the unit cost of delivery decreases, and that that saving is then shared between the individual parties. And the blockchain here can facilitate the exchange of contracts and keep a record of transactions. It is indeed a complex problem, which involves solving multiple combinatorial problems such as 3D container packing, route optimization, and automated negotiation. So we are still working on it. I won't say that this solution is out there yet, but it is actually possible, and it is only made possible by a combination of these multiple technologies. So I think I'm running out of time, so I won't talk further about these scenarios, but I hope this gives you a flavor of what we mean by a convergence effect in digital technology and how it might actually affect today's complex supply chain systems. So yeah, thank you for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexandra. There we go. The words get taken out of my mouth and already appear in the chat functions. I'd be thinking of questions. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Moving on to our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Chris Francis from SAP and also one of our advisory board members. Chris, please.
Many thanks, Lord Holmes, and thank you for the invite. I'm afraid I'm going to be slightly contrarian, as is my occasional want. I think it's worth thinking about very carefully what we mean here, and why is it important? I think it's, as the observation and as Alexandra's excellent example show, there are absolutely scenarios where all three technologies are in play at once. And there's some good reasons for this. First of all, the digital foundation, i.e. normally the ability to support some form of digital automation at the interface of your organizations, is common. There are many scenarios. Normally, as IoT is involved in the physical spaces, construction projects would be another relatively obvious one. You can easily see AI will be doing data processing, predictive maintenance. You can use distributed ledger technology to track physical devices, and IoT are physical devices that need maintaining and produce data. So absolutely, are there scenarios where all three are in play? But is this convergence in the way a palm computing has converged with the mobile telephone to produce the smartphone to the point where you almost can't buy the individual items anymore? No, I don't think so. And that's where I really differ in that sense. And the market will inherently work out what are the best economic solutions over time. There may be the market failures where this becomes important to policy, but at the moment, I would say that, as we say, this is actually development work by and large. It's very premature to start thinking about market failure and policy interventions. And therefore, that's where I think the danger is. The UK is really great at leading edge adoption. We're already good at that. The UK is a brilliant place to try things for the first time. We're already good at that. What we're not good at is building the digital foundation and ensuring everybody can play at the same time, which is increasingly important when you start looking at distributed ledger technology specifically. So I think if you're a venture capitalist getting excited about this and spending your own or indeed other people's money, that's absolutely fine. But I do think there is a danger in focusing public policy in these areas when I think it's much more important that the levelling up style agenda and ensuring everybody starts achieving the level of productivity of our best companies and getting that digital foundation sorted. And I'm a broken record on this. In the UK, we've had, we know that our top performing companies are playing with all these technologies all the time, and that's absolutely great. But then there's the other 3/4 of companies that aren't doing any of them because they don't have the digital foundation in place. And I think that's why I think it's a seductive term, and people get very excited about it, and that's fine. but I do think there are dangers in the public policy space. Because, as I say, we have a fantastic record of venture capital investment. We have a fantastic set of startup companies. We have a fantastic set of highly productive, world-class companies across almost every sector. We have some of the best and most advanced construction projects going. But we also have, for example, in that sector, a very long tail of very old-fashioned, very, very unmodernized approaches as well. So I think that's care, and I do think it's important to separate projects where all these things are operating and available, because there is this, their application areas overlap, but that's not the same as them becoming indistinguishable and inseparable over time, as we would normally in the tech sector think about convergence. And again, we don't want to stop thinking about AI as an analytics tool, as a video processing tool in the virtual spaces where there is rarely any IoT element. We don't want to stop thinking about distributed ledger technology where it applies without AI, because it's doing relatively simple supply chains, but still actually highly fragmented supply chains where it's a great element. And again, some IoTs devices are simply sensors with a common owner that are just reporting data into the public. Air quality ones come to mind. I'd greatly like to see them improved, as it happens, but nonetheless, that's what they are at the moment, and we can do with more of them as is, without overcomplicating them and creating a too high a target, shall we say, for public policy interventions for some of these things. Which is not to say Alexandra's scenarios are not fantastically interesting. So I hope that's okay. So a little bit contrarian. I'm not actually convinced that there is convergence as we would normally describe it, and I would beware of the seduction of these kind of things to start thinking that we can wire all our policy interventions and policy priorities into one lovely, well-defined, perfectly formed project, because I really don't think we can, and I think it would be dangerous to do so.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Two excellently different presentations so far, and none the worse for that. Excellent. Moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Stefan Brunstrand, founded Grupo and also is a member of the European Blockchain Observatory. Stefan, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Stefan Junestrand, and I hold a PhD in architecture, and I'm an expert in areas related to smart cities, intelligent buildings, sustainability, and blockchain. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Grupo Tecma, which is Spain's leading editorial company about sustainability, energy, and new technologies for the built environment. And I also work as a strategic advisor for public administration, private companies, etc., in universities, and I publish a lot of papers, both scientific and more popular. And I'm also, as you said, a member of the Blockchain Observatory. And my interest and research about blockchain circles around what can be applied in smart cities, and also specifically how it can be applied to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals is, as you all know, a list of 17 global goals and 169 targets set by the United Nations in 2015 for the year to be compliant in 2030. Reaching the majority of these goals is a question, literally, of life and death for a big part of the world's population, also in developed countries. The problem is that we are currently very, very far away from achieving most of the goals. And in many cases, we are in an even worse situation than 2015, when the goals were established. So what we can do to accelerate the fulfillment of the goals in time, I think, are two things. First, we need to take radically more challenging political decisions that all the politicians in here should take note of course. And second, we need to make a more intense and disruptive use of technology. Because with the speed we are developing technology, implementing technology today, we're never going to reach these goals. So let me share some reflections and idea about how blockchain and artificial intelligence and Internet of Things can contribute to reaching this SDGs. First, blockchain has its place in a broad technological ecosystem and combines exceptionally well with other revolutionary technologies related to the use of data, such as IoT and artificial intelligence. And IoT is the technology that helps us really to collect these large amounts and high quality data from any device connected to the internet. And if we want to register this in a cybersecure, immutable, and transparent database, of course, as we all know here, blockchain is an ideal technology. These large and well-structured data sets lets us then apply artificial intelligence and train our algorithms, etc. So the first use case I'm going to explain is the token economy for smart governance. This solution focuses on the social and economic aspects of the sustainable development goals, such as end poverty and hunger, increase health and well-being, fight corruption, create strong, trustworthy institutions. So public services such as healthcare and education and social welfare are incredibly costly and suffer from a heavy bureaucracy, fraud, etc. And it's also very complicated to evaluate the results of the spending within the current systems. The token economy is an economy that's actually an ecosystem built upon blockchain and AI that permits managing public services in a whole new way. It uses programmable currencies that provide several additional functionalities compared to current fiat currencies and opens up new possibilities for the public administration to improve efficiency, saves time and money, provide other services. It can also be used to enhance desired behaviors in line with the political goals, the so-called nudge economy. So the token economy should be use a stable coin tied to a fiat as the currency and to avoid fluctuation in its value, of course. And the token in the digital currencies are given properties for conditional use, defining where, when, how, and during which circumstances they can be used. And smart contracts can execute the economy in real time without any human interaction. And data analytics and artificial intelligence are applied to learn and improve services and strategies throughout the system. The functionality of the system is relatively simple because a blockchain platform provides a system to register services, providers, users, and payments, etc. And the first step of the process is that the government decides the budget for the different areas and specific use. The exact number of tokens or coins is generated given the properties for what, where, when, how, by who, and during which circumstances they can be used. And the tokens are then distributed to the digital wallets of the citizens. The citizens can then use the tokens they are assigned as a payment methods for the public finance services and products that they are entitled to according to the program conditions for their use. A purchase would simply look like that the social tokens with different permissions are sent from the public administration to the digital wallets of the family. The family can then use the token to buy food according to the program conditions. When they pay for the food, a payment gateway with a smart contract automatically in real time checks that the tokens are valid for the payments of the purchased food, register the payment and withdraw the tokens from the family's wallet, transfer the social token back to the government, and sends the equivalent payment in fiat currency to the store. The store then gives or delivers the food to the family. So, applying a token economy to public services is probably the most interesting application of blockchain in public governance. The second use case is a solution for the smart environment. This solution focuses on the environmental aspects of the sustainable development goals, such as clean water, air quality, biodiversity, etc. Environmental issues are probably the biggest challenge for today's society. Measure, register, give access, manage, and analyze data is a key to a successful fight against climate change and achieving clean water, air, biodiversity, etc. And the way it works is also simple. The IoT devices collects the data. The blockchain registers the data immutable, public, and secure. Smart contracts can execute according to the data, limit traffic, reroute water, etc. And the data can be viewed for verification. And the data can also be extracted and used for AI to find new patterns, make better decisions, etc. So as a conclusion, The SDGs are the most significant challenge, social, economic, environmental, on global and national and city level. We need to take more challenging political decisions and make more intense and disruptive use of technology to tackle this. The token economy for services and wealth distribution is a complex model with many challenges, but incredible opportunity to help us reach the goals. The environmental data application is simple to set up, but has enormous benefits. And we can apply blockchain technologies with very low energy consumptions and efficiency in both these use cases. So it's actually not an environmental problem either. So that's all for the moment from my side. It's been a pleasure to share my thoughts. I hope they are controversial, as should be a discussion and wake up new ideas and confront problems and possibilities. So that's all for me right now. I'll stop sharing.
Stefan, thank you very much indeed. 3 excellent thought-provoking presentations. Before we move to questions, Birgitte, are you in a position to share any hot off the Zoom call survey results for us yet?
So in terms of right now, in terms of those were kind of the highest ranked in terms of what seems to be the most important areas, well, you can see that many people do not regard education as being kind of in the top. Energy sustainability is more kind of popular towards the top in terms of the most important areas. Clearly, health is important. And finance is the leading area where we believe singularity is happening, and as probably finance, supply chains also a bit further down. In terms of currently, there seems to be a tie between why it's not happening, where half of the people say that company is not ready, and the other half say it is happening, and everyone else have not clicked any of the other options. So that's how it is right now.
Thank you very much indeed. Really interesting findings there. And for those of you who haven't done the survey, please do get involved, particularly if one of your favorite areas isn't coming up hard on the rails there. Do get involved. Right, to our parliamentarians, I think we've got Stephen Metcalfe still on the call, chair of the AI all-party group. So great to have some convergence of groups in tonight's session as well. Stephen, what thoughts, questions do you have for us?
Thanks very much, Chris. Yes, some very interesting and thought-provoking presentations. Alexandra, I was particularly taken with your supply chain model. I thought that was very interesting. What do you think? I mean, at the moment, it's a concept. How do you move the concept into a prototype, and then beyond that to demonstrate that actually there is some sort of commercial advantage to doing this? And we can often think up fantastic ideas, but converting them is one of the most serious and biggest challenges. Shall I ask my 3 questions all in one go, because there's one to each of you, and then because they kind of relate. So the great concept, Alexandra, how do you scale it up? Which then moves on to Chris, which was really, you talked about companies not doing what they need to do to build a digital foundation. And without that digital foundation, all these great ideas that are potentially coming to the fore won't be taken up. So how do we help as policymakers, rather than get bogged down in the policy of AI, blockchain and IoT, in actually building that digital foundation and making sure that that's solid upon which to build? So I'll come back to you on that. And then the third question was to Stefan. Interesting, the use cases you described. Obviously, I have some concern around a token-based economy, and a number of questions around how that would work, how you therefore grow your economy if it's a fixed set of coins. And I'm also concerned that it would give too much power to governments over and above the power they already have, and at times don't always necessarily wield as we might want. But the actual question is, one is, how do you deploy deploy ideas like that into developing countries? If that's, if our goal is to meet the SDGs, then we need to do it in country, and that can always be a challenge. You don't necessarily have the same developed delivery and governance systems that we have. And do you believe there is human acceptance? There will be human acceptance for these sorts of changes. And have you worked with social scientists to discover, understand how humans view themselves as part of this system? I hope that's not too much download, but I'm interested in your three answers.
Not at all. Excellent, Stephen, as ever. Three great questions, democratically distributed. Alexandra first, please.
Hi, thank you for the question. So I guess, so you've asked how do you scale it up? How do you scale up this concept, and how do you make sure it's adopted? So the types of scenarios that I have described, and I can describe further scenarios, are generally kind of challenge driven. So they are based on companies actually coming to us and saying, well, look, I've got this problem. How can we solve it using the technologies that you're developing? So because they are challenge driven, we know that also certain other companies within the UK have similar issues. And what happens is that we start typically with research projects and create demonstrative prototypes. And then once the TRL levels have increased sufficiently, we might be developing a foundation, for example, to bring other companies, other stakeholders inside. So that's kind of where we transfer the technology, I would say, to industry and then let it take its course. Over the years, what we have realized helps, and I think there is a drive for it, is that the incentivization needs to be built into the system. So, for instance, I was talking about logistics inefficiencies. So, the savings that you gain from those inefficiencies can then be apologies, my printer just started working for some reason. So they should be shared with other organizations. And the other interesting aspect there is software being open source. So that we have realized helps quite a lot, because it builds explainability to the system, and helps kind of democratize the resulting solutions.
Brilliant, thank you.
Brilliant, excellent, and good to see in this connected IoT world, the printer was able to work without you even doing anything towards it. So there's just illustrations of this everywhere. Chris, to your question, please.
So at the moment, we are going through the process where software is transforming into a digital service. And the big issue from public policy point of view, to my mind, is that means it's going from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. We know we have a massive skills gap, both in digital and net zero and many other areas, particularly the area that is not well addressed is the in-work skills development and training and development for in-work people. Education and work entry is much better developed in policy terms. And I think those add up to where you look at it. So at the moment, you've got a super tax credit for R&D. I can get a first-year allowance for buying a computer server, which I'm not sure I would really advise anyone that isn't attempting to get into the cloud business themselves to do these days. So my area is the only thing that can address this many companies is really the tax system. So, but what I don't want to do is say that this is the solution. So I would start small with nudge-style taxation incentives to improve training, to improve digital adoption in small companies, particularly those that haven't made any jump there at all. That can be controlled. We can collect data, and we can see what works. I think that, again, there's a big danger of policy people saying they know what the answer is here. And this is something we've been trying to crack for 20 plus years, if not more. So I think it would be facile to say, you know, it's a grant, it's this kind of subsidy or that, but start small, use the tax system, because that's the only thing that reaches everyone. It triggers all the business advisors, the accountants, the banks to start asking questions about, are you using this? Can you use this? Can you claim? It creates the community of business support that actually we lost in the UK many years ago as we stopped supporting companies like this. Actually, at the very time, since 2008, we've changed from really allowing churn to supporting employment in companies. Yet we haven't built the support structures that other countries that do that use. So that's what I would go. It's nudge, not because nudge is the answer, but nudge allows you to start small and help understand which companies can make the leap and how, bearing in mind, there will always be some creative destruction in the economy.
Superb. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Stefan.
Chris, was fantastic, your intervention, because it's exactly an example. You're talking about the nudge economy, small economies. This could be a perfect way to start with the token economy. You said you need nudges, you said you need to learn, etc. So the token economy itself, and to answer Stephen's first question, the example of the token economy could be at every scale. It could be a city, it could be a nation, it could be an organization, and it's not a fixed amount of money in that system. You allocate system in a budget, for example, for a 1 year budget, and you buy these for a pound in your case. You buy or create a fiat currency that is tied to, or a cryptocurrency that is tied to fiat currencies. You have a fixed amount that you distribute, and when the end is over, you can turn this into fiat money. So it's not limiting it's just controlling. So, and this is that was the first answer. And the second, if this could be deployed in developing countries, I think many developing countries have shown more eager to start using cryptocurrencies and in different levels, blockchain applications also, and I think they even have a bigger gain from this, because in many countries, developing countries, the transparency is less, there's more corruption, etc. So there's a bigger win for them than even it would be for a developed country to do this. But I think developed countries, what they mainly can do is to learn from the use and use the nudge economy to drive certain behaviors. I mean, if you have a health problem and you need to go to the doctor frequently, and you actually can give benefits to the people that actually do that, or I don't know. I don't want to get into specific diseases, but you can actually use this to change behaviors. And I think there's a huge. I don't think the problem is the human and people's acceptance. I really think it also ties to the thing we talked before and Chris talked about, is the knowledge and understanding of these kind of technologies from a political side. I think it's the biggest problem, and my mother was a member of the Swedish Parliament for many years, so I know politicians. Not everyone, but historically, and I think the win is a too long-term win for these complex systems, and I think it's today general politics is about short wins and quick wins, and there's no quick win in these systems. There have to be strategies. There have to be cross political ideologies. They have to be grounded together with the society, the end users, the interest groups, the companies, and so on. So it's extremely challenging, and I don't think it's. I think it's very challenging, but I think it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. Very interesting.
Great answers, and Stephen, thank you. Great questions. Now it's throwing those yellow hands and chat wide open for all of your questions. If you want to indicate if you'd like to ask a question, George will unmute you and bring you in. So George, who shall we go to first?
Yeah, I think Chris Wilson from Radom Network, part of the advisory board, had a question he'd like to ask.
Fabulous.
So Stefan, I was sort of wondering what the monetary incentive would be there for putting sort of data directly onto a public ledger, whether it's from an IoT device or some other data source. I think you sort of mentioned that towards the end of your presentation there. And if that was the case, how would the sort of private sector, if they had involvement in this, be able to monetize that data? And would that bring security risks, having the raw data on the blockchain ledger? And of course, the transaction fees as well. If this was a public ledger, the cost seems like it would be quite high, almost prohibitive for doing so. I kind of speak from myself with my own experience with blockchain. We work a lot at Radom around sort of helping companies access networks, but we don't look at sort of putting data onto the chain itself just because of the prohibitive cost of that. I just kind of got the feeling from the presentation you might be coming at this from a sort of behind the closed doors public sector owned blockchain, which not really be blockchain, it would be more a private distributed database, which is quite a sort of dystopian concept that I think a lot of people are quite fearful of.
Well, of course, it depends on what kind of blockchain you use. It should be. I don't neither. I believe that all the data has to be on the blockchain. It was not actually what I meant. It was a very simplified presentation. But I think there is a huge problem with transparency in general about all kind of data. I mean, the environmental data, for example, in many countries, in many places, there is a registry that goes on for 4 years. Then there's a new political direction of the city board, and they change the system and the data disappears and so on. So I think there's a ethical and issue about this kind of data. And I think, of course, all data of this kind of data should be open. And the way we design the system, it has, of course, to be efficient and energy efficient. It has to be allocate resources that are reasonable and so on. But I mean, recording data today, environmental data also requires server allocations. There are systems run by a private provider to the government and so on. So I can't really answer specifically, but I think it's really important that this data is accessible, open data, and it's immutable.
I agree with that. I just come in and also say when it's sort of private sector data that's being sold off, kind of a big thing for myself personally is ensuring that these companies who are selling access to this data do so in a very sort of open and accountable way. And I think that at the very least that transaction for the purchase of data should exist on a ledger, and it should be open to the public to see, if a company like Facebook.com sells some data, that we actually know who they've sold it to.
Yeah, or at least if you use Facebook, it's an alternative, but we also have to assure that there are regulations in place that actually control this and control mechanisms that are functioning, because today they are not functioning. And many people that take the decisions, they don't understand actually how the technology works and so on. So it's sort of a gray area, extremely problematic. Where, for example, big projects like the Toronto waterfront project actually failed. What's the question about the privacy of the data? It was probably the biggest smart city and sustainable city project in the world, and it failed because of the use of the data. The Google Sidewalk Labs weren't clear about the use of the data. Also, that the data was collected by the private companies participating in this project was a huge problem, of Of course, it can't be done like that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Stefan. George, next question, please.
Yep. So we've got Philip Graham. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, Lord Holmes. Hope Nancy's okay. I work in healthcare, and I can see obviously the benefits of supply management and the Internet of Things. In fact, we're looking at smart watches that are already collecting health data and things like that. So, well, my question is perhaps going back a little bit in saying, when are we going to get interoperable blockchains? Because the NHS is a huge organisation and a socialist organisation, which I will come on to in a minute. When are we going to have that interoperability so we don't have to choose potentially a capitalist way forward, and certainly not tokenising healthcare, unless that tokenisation is done in a way that it's not monetary, it is a public health tokenisation, so we can give apples to children. I'm being a bit twee there, aren't I? But you know what I mean? We've got to stop where I think Web 3.0 is going with the capitalist and the locking in, and heaven forbid, identity or non-fungible tokens, for crying out loud. But anyway, so that's my fundamental question. When are these things going to work together?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Very clear. I'm going to come to our SAP man first with that. Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two issues. I mean, first of all, depends what you mean by interoperable, but by, or not quite, but almost by definition, a distributed ledger technology is a closed environment which you can only enter if you obey the rules. But I also come back to, you don't necessarily want to do everything the same way and put all these things in one group. So, for example, we're already using distributed ledger technology to ensure that counterfeit pharmaceuticals cannot enter the supply chain, right? So do we want to wait on that? No, we don't. That's a good thing right now, particularly in areas where to be honest, the UK supply chain, I think, is pretty robust, but there are certainly areas of the world where this is a massive problem. So I think where we would see it here is, as we've seen in other areas of public sector interest, there has to be somebody that sets the rules in these areas, that initiates it, and often will have to prime it. And to some extent, that suits, I would say, the NHS perfectly well. But as we all know, the NHS is also 10,000 organisations, not one.
We are distributed by definition.
Yeah, it is distributed by definition. So and this is why I said there are some real public policy challenges there, not necessarily for industry to say X should do Y in this space. We can certainly advise and help, but I think, what's it for? Who's going to set the rules, given the not completely, but these are, the structures are immutable once started, shall we say. There are versions of them that can change the rules as they go forward, but nonetheless, you need to be very careful. And at the very least, I would say, get involved in standardization work. There's a lot of standardization work going on. We don't bet on just one horse. To be reductionist for us, these are protocols that help people work together. That's great. But actually, those protocols will be set by the customer organizations in that sense. And I think it's almost dangerous to suggest that a supplier should start setting the rules.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a big relying party. And we're doing some stuff on digital identity where we realise we're a huge relying party. But I think I would then turn it to government. Government set standards. They decide which side of the road we drive on. They decide how far apart the railways are.
Whoa. No, government don't set standards the way I'm using the term. Standards are set by organisations like ETSI, Sensenelec, JTC1. That's where
you know what I mean. We have to get governments to work together as well, don't we?
Government need
our
to
supply chain is international.
Yeah, they need to select and standardise in the sense of being a prime, as I would describe it in a supply chain. But I think just need to be careful. Where I'm saying is what we often find in the standards world is we get very small scale joining of government. You get a government department with a specialist person who's interested. You very rarely get a holistic view from government saying, this is what we need from DLT standards, this is what we need from AI standards, this is what we need from ID standards. That's actually very rare. And I think it's stepping up and getting a much higher level input into the standards world much more regularly. And some other trading blocks have mechanisms for this that work various worlds. But the NHS is a particular ecosystem for this sort of thing.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. I will bring other panelists in, but in terms of getting people in, can we go to another question, George?
Yep, so we've got a question from Steve Barr, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hi, it's Steve Barr from Microsoft. My question's about, as we go and adopt blockchain more prevalent throughout the world, how are we going to reconcile it with the huge amount of energy that blockchain infrastructure takes up? You know, it wasn't that long that COP26 was around and everyone's signing up to climate emergency plans and so on. So how are we going to do with energy from blockchain?
Thank you. Stefan, the eternal energy question, what say you?
No, of course, it's a huge issue. And I think definitely we need to use blockchain technologies that consume a lot less energy. Ethereum, for example, is transforming now from the different to a different kind of proof of work to proof of stake. So this is the trend, and I think there is a healthy discussion, and it's a very, very big issue and important. But on the other hand, I think it's such the Web3 and blockchain and it's so important and it's so groundbreaking and so disruptive that we really need to keep up working on this in parallel to the work with using less energy, allocation of the service to places where we can use renewable energy, etc., etc. I think there is a multifaceted solution that we have to find, and that's a sort of an answer. I agree with you, and it's a huge problem, and the problem with the heating of the planet. It's the big problem is that we're not getting closer to stopping. So we need to find not only to consume less energy, we have to find new solutions. We have to apply technology heavily, intensively to solve all these kind of the problems with the environment. It's my opinion.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Is your lab currently melting the planet?
We don't have enough funding to melt.
But what's your view on it comes up so much and understandably, and all roads inevitably lead tediously but understandably back to Bitcoin on this. What's your view on the whole energy question?
So definitely we need to be very careful about understanding the trade-offs between how a certain technology can benefit us and the environment, and at the same time, what is the trade-off in terms of energy consumption? So if you're looking for allowing blockchain type technologies to optimize supply chains so that there is waste being minimized, then there is a trade-off between the energy being consumed. So I don't think that the answer to the question is very straightforward. Yeah, that's my quick summary answer.
I think it's a big challenge for everybody.
Yeah. No, it ties into the greatest challenge that we're all facing. Great. We're going to come to another question, but first, Birgitte, have we got any updates on the survey?
Yes, we have. Clearly, there's getting stronger and stronger trends. Really, the winner where singularity is going to have the most impact is finance and payment systems. But then we have seen a change in the tides on why technology convergence is not happening. Really, that the companies are not ready for singularity is now leading And after that, there is the poll saying that it actually is happening, but really the readiness for companies, or the lack of readiness for companies, is now leading. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Birgitte. I think that's very interesting. And whether one is a monetarist or a Marxist, ultimately, so much of it is about the dough and how that is deployed. And also from a personal point of view, very happy about that as co-founder of the all-party fintech group. Good to see that finance and the potential future finance now that we could have is in the mix there. George, our next question, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to read this one out. It's for Alexandra. They say, in Alexandra's scenario, there doesn't seem to be much other options for the IoT and AI parts of the chain. Presumably, the blockchain part is just providing the trust and security for legitimate interested stakeholders, but would other security measures be a valid option?
Alexandra.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. Thank you. Absolutely. I think it's more about the capabilities that are required to make a particular scenario possible rather than a very particular type of technology. From an AI perspective, the boundaries between certain statistical techniques and AI are fuzzy, for example. So one can call them AI or statistics. So I think that kind of also inadvertently allowed me to address some of Chris's comments earlier, because I don't think what we said in our initial sort of briefs were contrary to one another, because there are problems that these technologies that we are discussing can address individually on their own, and there are also certain scenarios that we can create only through their combination. It's by no means a tick box. The term itself, convergence effect, is very nice and catchy, but I get what Chris is saying there, and I don't think it's a convergence effect in that sense. And also, I think that some of the scenarios that are being enabled there are not only benefiting multinationals, it's actually more benefiting SME type organizations. So just answering two questions at the same time.
No, beautifully done. Thank you very much indeed. Got time for a couple more questions, but if people need to leave, please do, and thank you for being part of it. But let's take another question, George.
Yep, so I've got just another one. I'm going to read it out again. It's from Julie, and she says, she gets Chris Francis's challenge, but could these modern technologies offer a simple, cost-effective, accessible set of solutions for SMEs to engage in this digital world? Are you advocating they join the old-fashioned, legacy, expensive technology, or allow them to leapfrog that? Thank you very much.
Chris, old-fashioned, late 20th century solutions, is that what you're trying to push on us?
Absolutely not. As I say, the main issue is not to make it look and feel, and definitely not make it be, a big, complicated hurdle to do that leapfrog. Many small companies are digital natives from the get-go, particularly in things like the fintech sector. They are well able to deal with that level of complexity. Many of our existing small companies are not. I just want to make the path as easy as possible. And you'll have to accept my apologies. I have some commitments that mean I will have to drop off now.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to have had you. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your thoughts and insights, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much. George, another question.
Yep, so I'll take this one out of the Q&A as well. It's just come in. It says, does the panel think blockchain can be used to boost the election process? Create a remote voting platform to do local or national elections, to use more referendums to make important decisions? I know our next evidence meeting will be on this topic as well. So, it's good to get a good start.
Thank you, George, and a splendid question, and couldn't be more timely with second reading of the elections bill coming up tomorrow in the House of Lords, and I am having thoughts along these very lines. Stefan, what say you? Going to the heart of our very democracies.
It's a very good question, and it's definitely a key issue for democracy. I think a current democracy is an old-fashioned democracy, developed 200 years ago, the representative democracy, and it's not suitable for today's society. It's not participative, and it's not it's not. In my personal opinion, it doesn't work at all very well. And so there are many ways to do it. First, the election themselves. I think the election themselves should definitely permit to vote digitally. And I think it's a sort of a shame that in the last European elections, there was just one country that permitted elections digitally and for certain circumstances. So I think if we want people to participate, let them participate in an easier way. And I think it is secure enough. Additionally, I think there are a lot of interesting democratic processes that can be used through technology and to enhance participation in different kinds of way, not just the elections themselves or decisions in the national or local governments. I think the citizens' participation can be used and should be enhanced by new technologies. But of course, the democratic system with a direct representative system would be. I personally would prefer that. I think we can find new ways where people actually can feel participative and part of the governance of our nations and cities, and not only vote every 4 years and then the politicians can actually vote whatever they want. They are not like there's no social contract with the voter and so on. So I really think we have to think through the political system itself, but I unfortunately believe it's almost impossible.
That social contract point is a really really brilliant point. Alexandra, do you think these new technologies in concert could be part of driving a new dawn for our democracies?
I wish and I hope. I think looking at it from a manufacturing perspective, this discussion really reminds me of kind of democratizing the manufacturing space and allowing SMEs to benefit from digital technology. So in that sense, I think reducing entry barriers through low-cost open systems would be very beneficial.
Nice comparator made there. Thank you. George, one final question if you have one for us.
I haven't got anything from the Q&A, but I'd just like to ask the two panelists left what they an answer to the survey question, really. In which area do they think the convergence of blockchain, AI, and IoT will be the most beneficial themselves personally?
Thank you very much. Alexandra first.
I would imagine healthcare specifically would be one area that really could benefit from a convergent technology, and of course, very predictably manufacturing would be the second one, I would say.
Stefan?
Well, I think there are actually many. But first, the IoT part, it would be wherever we measure data, wherever we collect huge amount of data, and we actually don't have access maybe to the high quality data that we might find in some kind of industrial production and so on. But all these areas. So I think I don't think there's any specific area. I think as Alexandra mentioned, healthcare, of course, education, environmental issues, transportation, distribution, mobility, and I think it's like everywhere. And I think almost any area could gain from this convergence.
And to that point, I've saved my chair's prerogative till last. One final question to each of you. Stefan first. In this particular space we're talking about today, what would be your one ask for government?
I would ask them to take a first step, and I think they have to get quick wins and a quick proof of work that it's actually these systems aren't dangerous, they aren't scary, And I think the second use case I mentioned, for example, the collecting and environmental data. I know I work with a lot with sustainability and within cities, and etc. And I think and there is a really need for reliable, transparent data about the environment. So I think please start doing some blockchain experiments, collecting environmental data with the IoT solutions that you have mentioned, and make it open data. And then you can also play with artificial intelligence, the machine learning, and train your systems on that data. And I think it's a good use case because it's actually nobody could really lose on it. It's only a win-win solution for the market, for the industry, for the citizens, and also for the government that can actually prove they've done something and learn from that, and then take other steps within more complex areas, like the one we talked about.
Thank you very much. Alexandra, your ask of, from, for government.
One would be, I think, to help incentivize the use of AI and digital technologies to SMEs. I think it would be wrong to say to SMEs, which make up over 90% of the manufacturing companies in the UK, to just adopt simpler technologies first. I think they need to get in the game as soon as possible. And my second ask would be related to the environmental concerns that were raised earlier. Try and find ways in which we can address, help researchers address environmental footprint of these technologies.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Birgitte, a final sentence from yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for these excellent discussions we've had tonight. And I want to say to both the panelists, of course, thank you, and to the audience also, that on our APPG blockchain pavilion, you can see the videos from all our meetings back from beginning 2018. They're all there, including the reports from each single meeting and the photos from each single meeting from both Parliament and online. And clearly, of course, we hope to come into Parliament, Westminster Palace, very soon, when Parliament can decide how many people they can have in a committee room for the logistics reasons. So we hope that. But do check out our website, because there's a lot of interesting material there. And to go over the past meeting is both very informative, but also tells us how long our discussion has come.
Birgitte, thank you very much. Thank you to you, to George, to everybody at Big Innovation Centre for everything you do across the new technology space, to Alexandra, to Stefan, to Chris in absentia. Thank you for your excellent presentations and for fielding all those questions. And to everybody on the call, thank you very much for your participation, your comments, your questions, and your involvement. Very much look forward to seeing you all the next time we meet at the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Blockchain. Have a great evening. Take care. See you soon.